Hello and welcome to part 5 of Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking online seminar. I would like to address the topic of casual smoking and cutting down, because my whole smoking life I envied what I perceived to be these sort of happy casual smokers. I had always thought that somehow they had the best of both worlds, that on the one hand they got to smoke, but on the other hand, they didn't have the garbage that went with being a heavier or a daily smoker. Now I actually understand smoking. I can see that far from having the best of both worlds, these people actually have the worst of both worlds. Allow me to explain. I have yet to meet a smoker, casual or otherwise, that would encourage their children to smoke. If casual smokers believe that smoking is so enjoyable, then why won't they share this pleasure with their children? In moderation, obviously. Doesn't happen, does it? Yet these are the same parents that will drink alcohol with their children. But why are these parents so happy when their kids grow up to be non-smokers? Could it be that they don't want their children to make the same mistakes that we've made? Could it be that we want our children to learn from our mistakes? But you see, if casual smokers perceived smoking as being genuinely pleasurable, they would not perceive it as being a mistake. They would want to share this pleasure with their children. The fact that they don't, this raises a big red flag for me. And if casual smokers enjoy smoking so much, then why not do it more? If you enjoy doing something, do you do it more or less? You do it as much as you can, don't you? If casual smokers really enjoyed smoking, they would do it more. The fact that they don't, again, this doesn't make sense. And why do many lighter or casual smokers feel the need to brag about how little they smoke? What's going on there? I mean, if I said to you, you know, I can go 3 weeks without eating a piece of broccoli and it doesn't bother me in the slightest. What am I telling you? Am I telling you that I don't have a problem with broccoli, or that I do? I'm telling you that I do have a problem with broccoli. Because if I didn't have a problem with broccoli, I wouldn't feel the need to brag about how I can control my intake of broccoli. You see, just as all smokers have to lie to themselves to justify their smoking, casual smokers would have you believe that they could take it or leave it, that they have this masterful self-control over their smoking. But if that was true, they would leave it. If that was true, why would they take it? It just doesn't make any sense. The truth is that these smokers are just as addicted as you are, and just as addicted as I was. It's just that their addiction manifests itself in a slightly different way. You see, the way to understand these smokers is to look at what happens to you whenever you try to cut down or control your intake of cigarettes. Terrible things happen when you try to cut down. The first thing that happens is that you're keeping the little monster alive because you keep feeding him nicotine, obviously, even if it's on just a restricted basis. You're feeding it enough to keep it alive. And because the little monster is alive, he's going to keep the big monster alive, wanting you to, keeping alive the desire to smoke, as it were. The other thing that happens when you try to cut down is that you spend your whole life looking at your watch. Every 10 seconds you're like this, looking at your watch, waiting for your next cigarette. I remember once I tried to cut down to 1 cigarette an hour, but, you know, which for some people is not cutting down. For me, it's cutting down a lot. And I remember getting that panicky, sort of anxious feeling, even as I was smoking the cigarette. Because I knew that when I put it out, I had to go a whole hour without smoking. So I told myself, oh, okay, right, I just won't think about it. So, of course, you become obsessed with the idea of the next cigarette. So then you try, you say, well, I'll just do something to distract myself. I'll go and, I don't know, do my taxes or build an extension on the back of the house or something. So you go and build an extension on the back of your house. When you finish, you look at your watch, you've still got 10 minutes until your next cigarette. So then you begin to get devious. You start thinking things like, well, I'm not smoking while I'm asleep, so I'll take those 8 cigarettes and I'll bring them forward to now, just so I can smoke. And of course, this is ridiculous. You're like a hamster in a cage, just running, going absolutely nowhere. In his book, The Only Way to Stop Smoking Permanently, Alan Carr tells the story. Actually, he calls this woman the 40-to-1 woman. And it was a woman who smoked 2 packs a day. She figured that there was no way she would be able to stop abruptly, so she concocted a plan whereby she would cut 1 cigarette a day out of her regime. So 39, 38, 37, 36. By day 40, I'm a non-smoker, or at least this was the theory. When she came to Alan Carr's seminar, she had been on 1 cigarette a day for 4 months. And this is how she would describe her day. She said, I wake up in the morning, the first thing on my mind, cigarette. Oh, but I can't smoke it now, because if I smoke it now, then I'll have to go through the whole day without another cigarette. Bad idea. So, right, I'll get up, jump in the shower, I'll get the kids up, I'll get the kids breakfasted, I'll get the kids off to school, and then I'll have it. So she'd jump in the car, she'd get in the shower, she'd get the kids sorted out, she'd pack them off on the bus. She'd think, it's still only 8:30 though, it's still a bit early. I'll just do a couple of hours ironing, and then I'll have it. So she'd do the ironing for a couple of hours, still only 10:30, bit early. I'll just do the shopping, and then I'll have it. And it was like a donkey and a carrot, just dangling the thing under her nose, all day long. And she said, to be honest with you, I don't even know why I play these stupid games with myself. She said, because I do exactly the same thing every single day. Which is, about half an hour before the kids get home from school, I sit down and I smoke that stupid cigarette. And she said, as soon as I put it out, the tears come, the depression comes, because I know that I'm 24 hours away from my next cigarette. You tell me, is this the story of a happy woman? Oof, I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Yet, you know the irony? This woman's friends. Oh, I wish I could be like you. I wish I could just smoke 1 a day. You see, we make the mistake of equating, as many smokers do actually, of equating smoking less with being happier. But using this logic, why don't we see the most obvious thing? That you'll be your happiest as a non-smoker. But no, this is terrifying for some reason. It doesn't make any sense. Think about it like this. If you're on a diet, is food more precious or less precious? It's much more precious, isn't it? Well, cutting down smoking is exactly the same. You're dieting, but with respect to cigarettes. And what this does is it makes really every cigarette seem special. You see, if you're a very heavy smoker like I was, quite frankly, you don't even have any illusion that you enjoy smoking. You're just pounding these things down because you can't stop. And you're very aware of this. But for someone who's smoking 2, 3, 4 cigarettes a day, they end up building their whole life around those few cigarettes. And as we've been saying all along, because this is primarily a psychological addiction, I think that makes that person just as addicted as a chain smoker. Do you remember in part 2, when we were talking about how the vast majority of these so-called special cigarettes come after a period of abstinence? Well, when you're cutting down, you're effectively enforcing these periods of abstinence upon yourself. And as I said, what that does is it makes every single cigarette seem special. In any case, cutting down just doesn't work. I mean, you may be able to cut down or control your smoking for a couple of hours or a couple of days or a couple of weeks, but you will always end up back on your level. Because, you see, smoking's not a habit. You can't rip up a 20-a-day habit and build a nice new shiny 2 or 3-a-day habit, because it's not habit, it's drug addiction. And like any other addiction, it doesn't get better, it only gets worse. It is a huge mistake to think that you can control your smoking. I mean, do you really believe that you can get into the ring with the most addictive drug known to man and come out in one piece? In any case, even if you could control your smoking, why would you want to? What would that cigarette do for you that the thousands and thousands and thousands that you've already smoked didn't? It doesn't make any sense. You know, I was always so ashamed of how much I smoked. I had all of these friends that could keep it to a couple a day or even go a couple of days without smoking. And there I was smoking 40, 50, 60 cigarettes a day. Why couldn't I control my smoking like everybody else seemed to be able to do? And then I met Alan Carr for the first time, and he provided me with a totally different perspective. You see, for years I had seen my chain smoking as a weakness. He was the first person to put it to me that actually you had to be pretty strong to smoke that much. He's absolutely right. You see, heavy smokers tend to be physically strong, robust types, because the truth is, you've got to be strong to withstand the punishment. The truth is that many of these so-called casual smokers, they don't smoke more because they physically just can't hack it. I mean, of course, they're not telling you that. They want you to think that they can control their smoking. But the reality is that many of these smokers couldn't smoke more if they wanted to, because it makes them feel so sick. Another type of lighter smoker is the one that believes that by smoking less, they're managing the risks that are associated with smoking. Unfortunately, there is very, very little evidence to support this belief. If you smoke 1 cigarette a day, the risk factor for lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, so on and so forth, pretty much the same as if you smoked a pack a day. Another type of lighter smoker is the one that's trying to really reduce the amount they spend on smoking. I mean, life is expensive these days, really expensive. I mean, think about it. Gas prices, insurance premium hikes, you know, everything's going up in price these days, including the cost of cigarettes, which are set to rise dramatically over the next few years. I mean, did you know in some parts of Canada, cigarettes have already broken through the $10 a pack mark? You know, so many smokers try to reduce or control the amount they smoke to reduce the amount they're spending. And this is all very well-meaning, but it never really lasts. I mean, I remember telling myself that when it got to $2 a pack, I'm out. You know, too rich for my blood. When I quit smoking, it was nearly $8 a pack. You learn to live with the price. Another type of lighter smoker, I think, is the one in denial. They think that so long as they don't buy cigarettes, they're not actually smokers. These are the people that will just smoke your cigarettes. Yeah? These are the people that don't have many friends left, I don't think. I mean, isn't it odd, though, how many of these so-called casual smokers, if you put them in a situation where they can smoke more, they match you cigarette for cigarette half the time. The genuine casual smoker, the guy smoking literally a couple of cigarettes a year maybe, actually is really a non-smoker who thinks they might be missing out on something. So a couple of times a year, usually under the influence of alcohol, they try to smoke. The cigarette is absolutely disgusting. It makes them dizzy. It makes them nauseous. It makes them cough and splutter. You know, but at the next New Year's Eve party, they'll have a couple of drinks. They'll see someone smoking and they'll think, you know, let's do that again. And the same thing will happen. And this just really reinforces their decision not to smoke. In fact, they end up kind of baffled by the whole thing. They just get mystified as to how anyone could get addicted to something like this. But of course, this is how most of us started, and we know where that story ended up. The other point that we seem to miss when we're thinking about these lighter or what we perceive to be casual smokers is that many of them are using quite large amounts of willpower not to smoke more. I mean, in a sense, this means that they have the worst of both worlds, not the best. On the one hand, they're having to use willpower as if they were quitting smoking, but on the other hand, they don't even get to be non-smokers. They're still smoking. The next time you get an opportunity to watch people smoke, watch them. I mean, the most obvious thing that you will see is that there is no pleasure involved. I mean, whenever I'm in New York City, I walk up and down Fifth Avenue, and as I do, I walk past literally dozens of individual smokers. I mean, it's not like there's a big group of smokers and there's a real party atmosphere going on, everyone's having a great time. Mostly, smokers are just by themselves as individuals, gazing kind of glumly into the middle distance, doing their drug. They look bored and, in a New York winter, bitterly cold. Just so they can all do it again in an hour's time, and again, and again, and again, never being allowed to quit. The best people to watch, the best places, I beg your pardon, to watch people smoke is at parties. Because this is when they're smoking, but they're not really aware of their smoking. Imagine you kind of have X-ray vision, and you can see the smoke going into their lungs. And as the nicotine is absorbed through the lining of the lungs into their bloodstream, where it makes its way via the heart to the brain, where it attacks the central nervous system, making them feel anxious and edgy. And at the same time, it robs their body, the cigarette robs their body of oxygen and other nutrients, making them feel sluggish and lethargic. And the toxins contained in tobacco smoke attack the immune system, compromising its ability to fight off other diseases and conditions. Then when they put that cigarette out, visualize the nicotine leaving their body, being replaced by this very slightly empty feeling in the pit of your stomach, very similar to hunger. This sends a message to the brain that he needs to smoke again. So he lights up, he fires up another. And as soon as he puts that out, the nicotine begins to leave his body. So he gets this empty feeling again. So he has to light a third cigarette, and a fourth cigarette, and a fifth cigarette, and a sixth. And all the time you're watching this, ask yourself, for what? So he can remove this feeling, and by removing this feeling, he temporarily gets to feel like a non-smoker. But by smoking to remove this feeling, all he's really doing is guaranteeing it'll keep coming back. And as you're watching this process of withdrawal, replenishment, ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth going through the rest of my life addicted to a drug that doesn't even get me high, just so I can temporarily feel like someone that doesn't do the drug? It doesn't make any sense. Smoking doesn't make any sense. None of us chose to become smokers for life. And had we known that our first cigarettes as youngsters would put us in this situation all these years later, we never would have smoked them. You may have chosen to light that first experimental cigarette, but you certainly did not decide to be a smoker for the rest of your life. Paying through the nose for the privilege of being controlled and destroyed by a drug that doesn't even get you high. I mean, do you really think that other smokers feel so very differently to you? When you see people smoke, you have to get it crystal clear in your mind. They aren't smoking because they want to. They're smoking because they have to. They're not smoking because they want to relax or because they want to relieve some stress. They're smoking because they don't know how to stop. They're smoking because they're a drug addict. The reality is that if they knew how to stop smoking, they would do it in a heartbeat. Do you envy drug addicts? I mean, of course not. We live in a compassionate society where we see these guys and we wonder what has happened in their lives that has pulled them down this path. We don't feel envious. We feel terrible for these guys. Well, I'll tell you something. It's not crack that's killing 500,000 North Americans across the continent every year. It's your drug. It's not crystal meth that's killing 4 million people across the world every year. It's your drug. You know, when I was a smoker, like every other smoker, I think, deep down I always knew I would be so much better off as a non-smoker. But you see, I always sensed that I'd have to go through the rest of my life feeling deprived. And to be honest with you, I'm afraid I just don't do deprivation very well at all. And then it hit me. It's not non-smokers who are deprived. It's smokers who are deprived. Think about it. Smokers are deprived of their time, their energy, their money, their relationships, their self-respect, their self-esteem, and their freedom. Smokers are deprived of all of these things, not non-smokers. Non-smokers have these things. As soon as I understood this very simple point, I realized that I could be a non-smoker and not feel deprived. And as soon as I knew that, I knew I could be a happy non-smoker. And as soon as I knew that, I grabbed it with both hands. And I have never, ever, ever let it go. And I strongly recommend that you do exactly the same. Because like any other addiction, this doesn't get better. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And just when you don't think it can get any worse, it gets worse. You find yourself sitting in some doctor's office somewhere. And he says to you, look, I'm really sorry, but I got bad news. And then what do you do? Then what do you go home and tell your family? That you're sorry? It's not good enough. It's nowhere near good enough. Instead, take this opportunity to break free. By watching this seminar, you have worked yourself into a situation where for the first time in a long time, you have choice, genuine choice. Use this choice to trade in this life of fear and anxiety and stress and slavery, and trade it in for a life of health and happiness and freedom. In a moment, it will be time to smoke a final cigarette. But before you do that, I just want to share a couple of final thoughts. Most people at this point of the seminar are kind of a little unsure as to quite how they feel at the moment. There is no right or wrong way to feel at this point or any other point. Some people are champing at the bit to get on with their smoke-free life. Others feel a little bit anxious. Like I said, there's no right or wrong way to feel. The only reason that we really ask people to smoke a final cigarette is not because I feel that you necessarily want or need one. It's to provide closure. It's to draw a line in the sand. It's to say to yourself, this is the last time I am ever going to have to put myself through this. From this point on, I can begin to focus on how to be a happy non-smoker. Now, if you're feeling any fear or anxiety, then you need to understand that the only other option that you have to quitting smoking is to keep smoking. To keep smoking all day, every day, for the rest of your life, feeling like this or worse. It's the only other option on the table, and it's no good. It's nowhere near good enough. Instead, spin this thing around. I mean, think how amazing it will be never to have to stick one of these things in your mouth again. Imagine the freedom to go wherever you want to go, do whatever you want to do, see whoever you want to see, without constantly having to factor in your need to smoke. These are amazing gifts that you're earning for yourselves here today. The gift of a fuller, happier life, and the gift of true freedom. Why not give yourself permission to celebrate? So when you go out to smoke that final cigarette, you need to make a solemn vow, a commitment to yourself. This is the last time you will ever have to do this drug. Now, up until now, I have given you a total of 9 instructions, the 9th of which was to write down what it felt like to be a slave to nicotine. And as soon as you should write that list as soon as you complete this seminar. Now, you can forget the other instructions. They were really just for use as we were going through the session. Now, I said earlier that there are really only 3 essentials to finding it easy to quit smoking. And when I say easy, I mean ridiculously easy. The first is to realize that there's nothing to give up. The whole thing was a scam. If there were any genuine benefits to smoking, they'd be plastered all over the pack, or you could give these guys a call and they'd describe them to you. There is literally nothing to give up, apart from some illusions that you were sold, mostly as a very young child. And illusions which really appeared to be confirmed when your brain got tricked into seeing the alleviation of withdrawal symptoms as genuine pleasure. Now, the second essential to finding it easy is to realize that while physical withdrawal from nicotine does exist, it's like this. It is absolutely minuscule. The truth is, when you're a smoker, you slept through physical withdrawal from nicotine every single night when you went to sleep. And it was so mild that it didn't even wake you up. So if physical withdrawal from nicotine didn't bother you as a smoker, why on earth would it bother you as a non-smoker? In any case, you are 100% nicotine-free after 3 days. In fact, after just an hour of not smoking, your body's already 75% nicotine-free. This is over. And that's the third essential to finding it easy to quit, is to realize the second you put out that final cigarette, you're a non-smoker. This is finished. The only challenge that you have left is to be happy about that decision. And that's what part 6 of this session is for. Now, I would like you to start smoking your final cigarette. I'll see you again in part 6.